Hi everyone. Welcome back one more time. I, in this class, intend to introduce you to a concept in genetics, interesting concept in genetics called epigenetics. I will endeavor you subscribe to the channel and share the link, like the channel, and all of that. Okay. So, I don't know, but have you for once yourself or known of any individual who has at a time been kind of frustrated about the feeling of, how helpless humans have been? Like, there's nothing we can do about our genes. There's nothing we can do about our nature. In your elementary biology, your teacher must have told you that, okay, all your phenotype is made up of your genotype and your environment, and that your genotype is nature, and that it is fixed, and that this place is nature, and that you can do something about this, but that there's nothing you can do about this, you know. So that feeling of frustration, humans over the years, over centuries, have suffered and have endured this humiliating feeling, this humiliating position whereby nature has the upper hand. Like, there's nothing you can do about your gene. Once you're born that way, there's little or nothing you can just do about it. So genetics generally falls under this category, but this epigenetics is a kind of offers a little respite. This is the area of genetics that the idea here is something above genetics. Epi means like above or on top or the outer layer. So is trying to talk about the changes in characters or expression of characters that are not necessarily from the genetic code, from the gene itself. They are not from there. In one of my previous videos, I treated this topic, genetic code. You do well to look it up. So the changes in characters, in the expression of characters that are not as a result of changes in the genetic code. The genetic code is sacrosanct, and it changes, is passed in that way from generation to generation. However, there could be modifications to it, and it is these modifications that give rise to this idea of epigenetics. Those kind of things, they happen in nature. So there can be some modification to the structure of the chromosome, and that kind of modification can now make the certain aspect of that chromosome or that genetic code inactive, and therefore impacting negatively on how that gene that it's associated with is being expressed. One of the commonest forms of that manipulation is called mutilation. Okay, mutilation. This is where a methyl group at the molecular level now, a methyl group is now added to the cytosine on the chromosome, and then makes making it less active. Okay, and that can now have phenotypic consequences. So this area of genetics seeks to study how behaviors can not just affect this, but if there is a way that they are now transmitted, if behaviors or environmentally induced changes can be transmitted to subsequent generations. So that is the concept of epigenetics. Some few researches were thrown into limelight that excited or brought about the hype of the genetic of epigenetic as a field of study, an interesting field of study. Just for the sake of this introductory class, I just mention one or two. There was a situation whereby some group of scientists did this research, fed some group of mice with this substance, this plastic substance. They fed those group of mice with those plastic substance, and this resulted to some health challenges, obesity, and all of that among those mice. But it was discovered that when the F1 was born, they still had those same consequences. The F1 too came with those consequences as the parents went down, and that even this F1, they went on again to produce the F2, and those same consequences still lingered. Okay, so bizarre, right? Okay, so a lot of things in epigenetics as an emerging area are pretty much difficult to explain molecularly with the current knowledge of genetics, but the interest is high. It gives man a feeling of help, of doing something about what he hitherto thought he could do nothing about it. So there was also another experiment in which some group of mice were trained to be afraid, or trained to fear. So they were trained to be afraid. Let's call them fearful mice, or fearful mice. So some group of mice were trained to fear a certain smell, and then it was found that when they bred and produced offspring, the offsprings too tended to be more afraid of that smell as compared to the other offsprings from the general population. All right, so that also raises an excitement about epigenetics. Then everybody knows what we call fetal alcoholic syndrome. Fetal alcoholic syndrome, is that when a mother, a pregnant mother, subjects herself to alcoholism, the consequences of that are also transferred to the offspring. Okay, but what we cannot establish strongly in all of this is whether, to what extent, all of these acquired defects can be passed on. Okay, so epigenetics generally encourages us to know the importance of environment. Okay, so that environment should be given attention to in rearing animals and even in humans. So environment is as very important as the nature or the genetic makeup. We all know as students that you may do well in one school better than in another school, though your genotype, your brain in this case is still the same. But because of one environmental difference, you may do better in one place as compared to another. If you are born smart and you don't have access to good nutrition and good environment, you are going to grow up to be a dull adult. But if you were born smart and you still have access to good environment, you're going to grow up into an adult that will be pretty much smart. So the concept of epigenetics is just about non-genetic impact on the phenotype, non-genetic modification of inheritance rather than the gene, and if that could be transmitted from one generation to another. So it is characters that are modified not because of the genetic code has changed. There's been no mutation in the genetic code, bottom line. No mutation in the genetic code, that's the bottom line. But there is a kind of a modification, e.g. an attachment of a methyl group to it, therefore making it to change. This is the kind of mutilation. Mutilation here in nature has been known to bring about differentiation of cells. Okay, this is whereby differentiation of cells whereby you have what we call a stem cell. A stem cell can carry the same genetic code. Group of stem cells can carry the same genetic code, but as a result of methylation, one can develop into a liver, one can develop into a kidney, one can develop into something. Okay, so the something B's, by virtue of this technology, they may be clones, but one can develop into a worker, one can develop into a soldier, and whatever. Okay, so these are just examples whereby this mutilation or modification of the genetic code, rather than changing the genetic code, just modifying it by attachment of methyl group, just an attachment of a methyl group to the cytosine, and can bring about some of this kind of things. So this is the concept of genetic code. Subscribe to the channel, please, if you can, and then like and share the video.